Okay, guys, we're back talking a little bit more about lighting. Actually, a lot more, but especially how lighting is impacted by textures. Okay, you can see we've got a whole bunch of stuff in front of us here. Um, I divided it up into different panels for us for a little bit of ease, but it's still going to take us a little bit to get through this unit. So if you have to, break it up a little bit. I've got 9 panels here, and if you want to take a break after each, that's no problem. I'll also attach this printed out, or rather, for a printout, and then you can kind of follow along if you like, okay? It'll make more sense once we get into it. We can see panel 1 is wood, panel 2 is concrete, brick, some foliage, some leaves. Then we've got some snazzy latex here, some metal, right? This is leather, or my leg if I don't use moisturizer. Okay, sorry, that's my one dad joke of the day, right? We've got some lighter tone skin and some darker tone skins, and I've included all these kind of for reasons, right? So the first thing I kind of advise is sometimes we get thrown by colors. Colors can throw us off when we're trying to understand how light impacts things, and I get it because we've already talked about, how colors can be added to a rim light or something like that. And it's awesome. It's fun to play with colors. But one of the best things to do is attack it by just the tonal value. Okay, if you can get just the values down, then the colors can come after. So why don't we take a look at this? Let's come up here and we'll take a look at the wood one first. Zoom in a little bit. And what do we see? Well, let's see. I'm going to say, you know what? I can cheat. I can cheat and say on right here, I'm going to color pick. I'm going to say you can see off to the side of the screen just a little bit. It's in the close to white, but not quite. I'm wrapping too much here. I've set up this panel here just as something that we could work on together. So if I want to, what I could do is one of a few things. I could come in here and start to, draw in the individuals, or come even bigger and just kind of color it in with a white, and then come in with something dark, right? Like, let's see if I might come something like that. And I can come in and start to extend it down, right? You can see how, like, if I come over it a few times, it starts to match that color a bit. I can come in and start to use a little bit of texturing that I want. Sometimes it's spotted, sometimes it's more of a shade, right? And so if I keep doing this, eventually what it's going to start to look like is I've got wood. I've got these wood grains and paneling coming down here, right? And you can kind of change up and have some light gray come down. And so what this exercise is trying to do is help you to follow the patterns that you see, just understanding the tonal value. Okay, it's important to get that tonal value down, right? Okay. So as we back out a little bit, this is what I want you to do, is to try to see if you could copy this. Now, how you want to do it is up to you. My personal suggestion is just pencil. Pencil, you've got like a great range of tonal value you can do it with. But if you're not comfortable with pencil, if you prefer ink, let's see what you got, right? Okay. So we're going to come over to the next one. That's concrete. And again, I'm going to kind of color pick, and I'm going to say, okay, well, here's my off-white. I might grab, depending what you're using as your resource, like your material, right? Look at how that just blended in, right? Okay. So I've got this, but then what happens? I'm just doing this little corner here because I know you guys, when you're following along, you could do pretty much as you want or as little as you want. Well, I've got these specks going on here, right? So I've got these dark specks, irregular shaped, right? So I'm going to grab all the way down here in a black and do up some irregular ones here and kind of see if I can get them in. And then I might come into a lighter one and just start to do some of this patterning, we can see these dots going on. We can see them starting to carry over in, right? We can see how they sometimes trace in almost a squiggly line, right? You can see some little hooks. You can drop the value down just a little bit. And, I'm going to say when you're working digitally, there are some cheats on this. There's going to be some ways to make it easier on you. There's certain brushes you can download depending on the program you're using. I didn't want to do that on here because the lesson I'm showing you is not how to just do these little specs, right? That's not the lesson here. I hope I'm not trying to give you that lesson here, right? I hope what I'm showing you here is that you want to try to understand how to mimic some type of texture, okay? Understanding what is going on with the light. So what do we think is happening with this? When we talk about the lighting, how it's impacting here, right? Chances are the light is hitting these high points in this groove, for an example, and these low points here, well, what are they? This is where the light isn't hitting, or there's some texturing and some coloring in there, right? Okay. So that's good to understand. And so let's say we start to shift the light. We start to shift it, and let's say there's some highlight of a secondary light source, and it's only touching the ridges of things, right? We could have it touching just a little bit of the ridge of each high point of this, right? And it's not showing up really well there. Maybe I should go with more of a orange or something, right? Just to kind of show you. So maybe it's only going to touch this much, right? And it's just going to touch along the ridges of each high point. Okay. There you go. All right, let's keep going on. Brick. Brick's interesting. So what are we going to do? I'll do a color pick for something in the middle here. Try middle for an example. See if that helps at all. Just kind of color it in. If you're using traditional stuff, traditional medium, you can start to color lighter, a little bit harsher. Here's the brick. This one is formed this way, right? And then what happens? There's some patterning going on here. This is where the light is coming in here, right? So there's some patterns going on. We can see that below it, there's some darkness, right? So we can see how that brick starts to outline down here, right? And then there might be some texturing, some more highs going on, coming down, right? And this really is just about working the textures, feeling comfortable with it, seeing if you like how it feels, if it's looking the way you want. You can do this by, if you have got a pencil, by the pressure you're using, right? You can do it by, if you've got a lighter pencil, like even a white. I know that crayon packs comes with white that we never seem to use that much, right? There's a lot of ways you can get away with starting to add color to things, or rather the tonal value, starting to really mess with it. There we go. Okay. So what you would do is just start to work these patterns, right? You can imagine maybe there's another brick somewhere in here, and then you could start to kind of build it up on the top where the light's hitting a little bit, right? And as you zoom out, it starts to look like that brick, right? So this is a nice exercise for you to keep on rolling on, right? This one's going to be tougher. What would we do? Honestly, what I would probably do is maybe I would pick low, kind of color in, then pick, there seems to be about 4 values here. There's this one, and maybe I would come in and start to do some of these types of values, right? And of course, depending on how much time you want to spend on it, you could spend a lot of time and maybe get into it that there's a dozen different values or something, right? And then let me pick a lighter one here, maybe there. We can see how the shapes might take form. Right? Maybe looking at it and saying, well, if the light source is coming from top right, then that's where, that's where I know a lot of that light is going to touch the leaf, for an example. Right? I might do a couple little highlights there. And then maybe grab this last one. And what we could do with this one is kind of run a rim just as if the light's just barely touching it, right? And that starts to give it that three-dimensional form. There we go. Cool. Foliage, right? This is something that I'm kind of practicing along with you. I hope you've got your sheet out, and I hope you're playing with it. That with whatever medium you're doing, you're kind of messing around a little bit, right? This one should be fun. Usually what I like to do is I go dark on this sort of thing, right? Let's just kind of bring it on down. And that's looking mighty ugly, but good enough. Then there's going to be kind of this kind of light gray going on here, right? There we go. Seems to be coming on the top here too. Seems to be coming in on that one. And what you can do, it's not here, but what I like to see is a much smaller, let's say it starts around here. I'm going to go even smaller than that and higher than that. Let's say we can go something like this, right? And you can, depending on what you're doing, like I sometimes use kind of a liquid gel, right? If you're looking to smudge, you can add some extra white in there and then just kind of drag it along, right? But what you're doing is basically looking at, okay, the light is coming from a certain direction, it's hitting in one area, and that's going to be the high, right? That's going to be the super high. We've talked about this, right? But because this is such a dark surface, that high gets really concentrated into a thin band, and it only highlights on like these little ridges that tend to happen and stuff, right? Okay, so you can see how that works with all these highs, right? It's very wet looking, and digitally, a lot of people will use kind of a fingertip smudge tool. Let's see if this can, they'll come in with this kind of smudge look, right? And you can do this actually with your fingertips, depending on the medium, right? Okay, and so you can come in, add some white, and then kind of come and smudge it out, and it looks all that liquidy look, right? Okay, so this is highly dependent on the medium, but really the fundamental is the same, that you really want to focus on where is the light touching, where isn't it touching, and how can I get from A to B? The tonal value. How can I drag it along from the darkest of the value to the lightest? And does it make any sense according to where the light source is coming from, right? Okay, this one's tough. Because usually what we do is we use some tricks for it. What I usually do when I'm doing this kind of brushed metal, what I usually do is I'm working digitally most of the time, right? So what I'll do is something like I'll grab an airbrush and I'll go really light. Oh, that's too much. Let's see. Yeah, more like this. I'll go something like this. And you can see these white specks starting to come. Let's see if I zoom in, if it makes a little bit more sense, right? And then I'll do that same type of smudge thing that we were talking earlier. And I'll kind of just drag them out sometimes, and it can, the more I punch it forward, let's see, the more I punch it forward, and I can just smudge it. Right, I can start to drag it out and stuff, right? Another one, let's see if I blend it. I can fingertip this and drag it, right? And so you start to get this, you work up and down from there, right? That I'm not sure if it's showing up on the screen really well, but you can kind of have these dark specks, have very light specks, and you can concentrate them a little bit more in a very specific row, right? That type of thing. And then, like I said, you start to drag it out and you get that brush metal look, right? The point is, sometimes what you might want to do is overall through the whole thing, you might want to add another kind of overlay of where the light might hit. And so you can have almost this cross section of light that's swirling over it as we still got this overall thing going on. So it might be darker down here, and then this band of light going across it. As you can see how these band of lights are here, right? It goes from light to dark to light to dark to light to dark. And so you can kind of mess with that. This is really dependent on the medium. If it's a pencil you're using, it's tedious. Digitally, as I showed you, I could just come in and do the specs and then drag them all out, right? Okay, let's go on to the next one. My dry skin. Again, you can sometimes get a lot of brushes that do this. I actually kind of enjoy this. There's a few ways to kind of approach this. What you can do is, like, once again, pick the low, come in, fill it up, and then get even more detailed, and start to draw each individual type of line. Like, let's say I was going to do this and I come in here, and what do? I just kind of continue this in, I come in and I start adding all these snaky patterns of veins and stuff like that. They're actually not veins, sorry. This is just a close-up cracking of the leather skin, right? And so you can kind of do this. I've done it when I was doing animal skin. I would kind of come in and have a bunch of flow going through it. I remember doing a rhino, and then what worked out really well was this cross section hatching and stuff, right? So what you can do on this is it almost looks like this funky mountain range right now. Then you can go darker on it, kind of trace under it a little bit, maybe with a bit of a smaller one, give a little bit of a trace under, give it some volume there. So it looks like it's sitting on something a little bit more. You can even add other ones in behind, right? And then, so what are these? These are raised and lower parts. And what does that mean? That means the raised parts are having light touch them, right? So that means you can see how this goes from light to medium to dark to really dark, right? So we can go even smaller here. And on this light part, it's just touching where the light would be hitting it, right? And you can keep doing these cracks to your heart's content. This is extremely tedious. Generally speaking, I don't think you'd ever do like a character sheet with something like this on here. But you never know. If you want to hyper render some type of animal texture or something like that, and you've got a couple days on your hands, then this might be the way to do it, right? And you can add, and you can do it sometimes by just like, look how this is a light color, but I'm just lightly touching it and texturing it, right? Coming over it, just going with the sweep of how the texture might look. You can get away with this a lot with pencil because pencil pressure is key, right? So you can come in and do that type of thing, right? There you go. Okay, so like I said, you could either use a kind of a cross texturing that I've used for animals before. Or you can get even more tedious and just go in and do every single one and snake it all out until it looks exactly how you want it to look. This one's interesting. We've got two different skin tones here, right? Very clearly. If I color pick this one, let's actually pick a dark spot, not super shadowed. Oh, why don't we go? No, let's go with medium. Okay, so there's her medium, right? We can see if I try to plot this in, this is her medium. That's actually pretty dark. Let's try again. Yeah, that's probably close to her medium. This is her medium. This is her dark. And then where's her light? Lightest, maybe up on the cheek, catching all that light, right? Okay, does that look about right? Now, what percent of this face falls into dark? Geez, maybe just under the chin here, a little bit by the eye, a little bit by the mouth, tucked behind the ears. That's about it. Even the cleavage isn't that dark, right? Okay, let's go over here just a little bit. And we said we wanted to hit the medium first. Medium is somewhere around here. Surprising no one that the medium is a little darker here, right? Or a fair bit darker. The dark, we can kind of go back here maybe. The dark is quite dark. And where's the light? Light might be, I don't want to go in her eyes, so like this reflection here, a reflection on the cheek usually, right? And there we go. Okay. So what does this tell us? It tells us something that everybody already knows. Different ethnicities have different tonal values for their skin, right? It's nothing shocking. Nothing at all. But what is important is that you understand where this person, where you can use the tonal values to kind of color and match them, right? So if I come down here and I'm trying to work this chest a little bit, let's see if I bump it just a little bit more. You know, I can kind of try to lighten this chest here. Okay, so I'm gonna kind of come in here and I might bump it down a little bit. And here's a bit of the shade coming in, right? So, you know, like her skin tone is going to be a majority in this spectrum, in the lighter spectrum. Whereas when I come down and I'm working on this girl's tones here, I might come into the shoulder, do that, come on this side, bring it over, and that's even darker maybe. It helps to pick, but I'm just kind of picking to save time here. If it's really you doing it, you're going to be experimenting a lot more, right? So I'm going to come in here, and you know what? I might as well shade it all the way across, and then I'll come down and I'll pick this kind of mid and come up with it. And those are the tones, right? So, you know, same kind of thing. It's not the face; it's a little bit off. We could see that again, surprising nobody, that the Caucasian girl on the left, Scarlett Joe, she's got lighter skin, and the lovely lady on the right has darker skin. The one thing that I would advise, we're not talking about texturing right now for skin texture. What I do with skin texture sometimes is kind of what I did before. I use a bit of an airbrush, but again, it depends on what you want to use or what medium you're using. Sometimes I'll come in and just do a little bit of texturing. So it could be a little bit of texturing here, and I'm going to come up here and put a little bit more texturing in here. And then I'll even come and just, oh, that was too much. I might come and just smudge it a little bit. Our skin has pores, right? So what you might want to do is just texture a little bit, smudge it out just a little bit so that the skin has some type of feeling to it. You know, like same thing if we were over here, you can see how this has this stipple, like the skin pattern to it and stuff, right? So what would you do? Well, you can come and kind of start to add in a bit of texturing here, right? Okay, and then maybe just lightly. If you're working with pencil, I use my finger to smudge it out just a little bit, right? So this would be something that you could work on again and again and again and try to find the pattern that you want for the level of detail that you want when it comes to rendering. Okay, so this is a rendering course, and we're in this section, we're mainly talking about light. So with the wood, with a lot of these, we talked about not just the patterns, but where the light might touch the pattern. Touching the pattern of the wood on the highest ridges, touching the pattern of the leaves on the leaves that reach out for the sun type of thing, or the light or whatever. With the brick, if the light is coming from above, then, the top of the brick is going to have more light to it. The bottom of the brick is going to cast that shadow, right? With the latex, where's the directional light coming from? And if you can, depending on the medium, give it that liquefied form as it wraps a little bit on that rubbery latex, right? Brush metal, even though the brush metal has that streakiness to it, it can still carry highlights, highs and lows through it all, right? When it comes to skin, whether it's leather, animal skin, rhino or whatever, or human, you want to have a bit of texturing to it. Hopefully not too much if it's a live human, right? But you want to pay attention to those tonal values and stuff, right? And then after you get that all in, this is just tonal values, then you add in color. Okay, guys, I really hope this unit was interesting for you, that it's something that you can practice along, whether you're practicing on the sheet that I'm providing, or whether you're practicing on some of your own sheets, right? That you can really experiment and say, well, when light is hitting light, what's the reaction? When shadow is hitting light, how far does it go? When light is hitting dark, what's the reaction? How much does it spread? How sharp is this line, right? How sharp is this line here on the latex? And when dark, when the cast shadows and all that, how much does that spread as well, right? I think this is a great thing to experiment, because let's say you've got a hero that has, I don't know, the left side of them is a black supersuit and the right side of them is a light supersuit. Well, how would you go about inking that? How would you approach it? The light's going to hit it, but how that clothing, how that costume reacts to it is going to be totally different, right? That white latex is not going to have a heavy shadow on it. The dark part will, right? But in turn, also, the light latex is going to be all whited out when it comes to any light hitting it. But the dark side might just catch it in a few areas, right? So hopefully as this course goes on, you get a lot of practice, a lot of different ways of grabbing on to how light hits a form and how you decide to render it, right? This particular unit here was to talk about how it might hit different textures and how you can express that in that tonal value. Okay, guys, this was a good one, and I hope you learned tons from it, and I hope you keep practicing.